Thank you everyone for joining us. Welcome in today's Qesher book club. My name is Dora. I'm joining you from Budapest, from Hungary. It's
Ah,
lovely to have you all here. And I'd just like to say a few words about Qesher for those of you who are joining us for the first time. And then we'll get started with today's presentation. Qesher is a project that we started, the two of us. You can find here Sebastian also under the name Qesher. We are both based in Budapest. And we started this project almost 6 years ago now. And our aim is to share Jewish history, Jewish culture, and also the present day lives of Jewish communities from all over the world. So, those of you who join us regularly, you probably know that most of our presentations are about visiting different cities and countries. And learning about their Jewish history, their Jewish heritage, their present day community. And from this initial project, we kind of grew out this second project, which is our book club series, in which we introduce Jewish themed books that are also somehow related to this topic of Jewish diaspora, Jewish heritage, Jewish culture. Today, we're very happy to welcome Susan Weiss Liebman, who was among MIT's early female undergraduates, part of a pioneering generation of women in science. She earned a master's from Harvard and a PhD in genetics from the University of Rochester. She taught genetics and led research for more than 3 decades at the University of Illinois, Chicago, and is now research professor at the University of Nevada, Reno, advocating for genetic testing awareness. And The Dressmaker's Mirror is her first book. We are very happy to introduce this book because we think that it's very relevant for many people in the diaspora and especially in Ashkenazi families, which Susan will explain why that is. It's both a bit of genetics, but it's also a memoir. It's also about her story. And now I'll pass the word to Susan to let us know about what this book is about. And if there are any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. And after the presentation, we'll open up for Q&A.
well, good morning, good evening to all of you from all over the world. This is very exciting. Thank you so much, Dora and Sebastian, for this wonderful invitation. I am Susan Liebman. I'm joining you from Reno, Nevada, and I'm a geneticist, and I do research on the model organism yeast. But today I'm here talking to you about my book, as a daughter, as a mother, as a sister, and as an aunt. So let me begin by sharing screen. I can. For some reason, oh, here we go. Share. So our story begins in the Ukraine, and it moves through the streets of Brooklyn, and it ends up in a genetics research lab. And it's a story about what Jewish immigrants brought with them when they came to the United States, when they came to America. And it wasn't just their religion and their culture, but they also brought their genes. And it's also a story about secrets, family secrets, and specifically why my grandparents lied about the tragic death of their firstborn 4-year-old son, and how that lie affected my family for over 100 years. This is Elke, my mother's grandmother, when she was about 45 years old in the end of the 1800s. And she's wearing her shtetl. That's a wig that the married Jewish women wore in the Ashkenazi community. And this is after a diphtheria epidemic killed her second husband and their 6 children. This happened within a period of about a month. She lost all of these people. And she decided to move to the United States from Poland and join her surviving child. She had a child from a first marriage. That was my grandfather, Simon. And he left Poland because he couldn't continue his education there and came to the United States where he studied and became a dentist. Um, so among the treasures that Elke brought with her when she traveled to the United States was some Shabbat candlesticks. She actually had bronze ones that my sister got, and these are the silver candlesticks from Elke that I got. And we still treasure those today in family seders, Thanksgiving meals, and of course on Shabbat. Um, my father's family fled the pogroms in Poland. I'm sorry, the pogroms in Ukraine, and he left in the early 1900s, and they came through Ellis Island like so many other Jewish immigrants. And they first settled in Pennsylvania. And as a young man, my grandfather was very excited, wanted to work for the railroad, and he got a job working for the railroads. And he met my grandmother, who was 19 when they married. She was a talented dressmaker. And after their marriage, shortly after, they had their first son, Eugene. And here's a picture of them with Eugene. And on the right is a few years later when Eugene is about 4, and he's with his younger brother, my father, who is 2. And according to family lore, shortly after this picture was taken, in August of 1916, my Eugene was doing somersaults in the room where my grandmother was working on a dress. And she had one of those huge, heavy dressmaker's mirror in her workshop. And he did a somersault and he knocked into the mirror and it swayed back and forth. And then it fell on him. And this huge, heavy mirror fell on him and it killed him instantly. So shortly after this tragedy, the family decided to leave Carbondale, Pennsylvania, and they left their community, their friends, their support. My grandfather left his dream job for the railroad, and they moved to Scranton, Pennsylvania, where my grandfather opened a furniture store. And 8 years later, they had another boy, my Uncle Cyrus, shown here as a child. But then in 1929, you know what happened in 1929, they were hit too by the Depression and reversals in the furniture store. And they picked up again and moved to Brooklyn, where my grandmother had brothers. And here they are outside of their Eastern Parkway apartment. And you can see, maybe you can see if I tell you that it says Weiss Dress Shop, the sign in the window where they lived. My father is 16 years old here. His father, David, is over here, and the little brother, Cyrus, who is about 10, he's about 6, he's 10 years younger than my father, is sitting. Shortly after this picture was taken, David died suddenly and mysteriously. And my father, who was a good student and an athlete, had to fit in going to work to help support the family. His great joy in life was meeting my mother, and they met in high school, but they didn't marry till later. But he was in high school, he was recognized as the brains of the class, and she was the beauty of the class. So this is the high school that they attended, Erasmus Hall High School in Brooklyn. It was a huge high school even then. It was on a major street. And behind this big building of the high school was a little wooden frame house that was built in 1786 as Erasmus Hall. So this high school has been around since 1786. There were a lot of Jewish immigrants, children of Jewish immigrants in the high school when they attended. And here is the picture of their class of 1932. There are 300 kids in this graduating class, and you can see Um, we've circled my mother and father's picture here so we could see them. We had this hung up in our house for many years. And my sister and I also attended Erasmus Hall High School. By the time we attended this high school in Brooklyn, it had a wing on Flatbush Avenue, then a wing through the city block, then a wing on Bedford Avenue, and then a wing through the city block. So there was a campus in the center, and here you can see the old wood frame Erasmus Hall building. On Flatbush Avenue, there were Jewish bakeries, movie theaters, kosher delis, department stores, and on Bedford Avenue, it was a residential street. We actually lived on Bedford Avenue when I was a young child. So our story begins, however, about 500 years ago. There was a large Jewish population in Central and Eastern Europe, and these were descendants of Jews that were expelled from Judea when the Romans destroyed our temple in 70 AD. And among this large population, there were occasionally, because it was such a large population, rare mutations. And here I'm showing one, but there were a number of rare mutations that occurred in a large population, much larger than what I'm indicating here with the stars. And what happened over time, though, was instead of this population continuing to grow and grow and grow, you know about the pogroms and the death that the Ashkenazi Jews suffered. And this is what we call a bottleneck. So from the large population, about 500 years ago, we estimate that there was just about 300 to 500 survivors from all of the persecution and death. And by chance, one of the survivors still had this rare mutation. And other rare mutations. So this one I'm talking about is in the heart disease that affected my family, but there's also, you're familiar with Tay-Sachs mutations that Jews have and BRCA mutations that Jews have. They all were rare mutations in the large population, and then survivors had those mutations after the bottleneck. And then we continued to intermarry and stay isolated. And so now the rare mutations aren't so rare anymore because of the expansion of this small population where those rare mutations were not as rare anymore either. So I want to point out that some people think that Ashkenazi Jews have bad genes and that they mutate a lot. That's not what happened here. It's nothing, we didn't get any more mutations than anybody else. It's just the history of having a bottleneck and then remaining isolated that causes this kind of genetic signature. And it's not just Ashkenazi Jews that have what we call founder effects, but other populations that have undergone bottlenecks and remained isolated, like French Canadians who had a cultural isolation, and the Finnish who were geographically isolated in Finland also have founder mutations. Okay, so now let's get back to my immediate family story. And this is a picture of my dad during World War II. And he carried this picture of my mother and sister, my older sister, I wasn't born yet, with him in his pocket as a soldier. And they were his strong motivation to come home. And he did come home. And having survived the sudden loss of his father when my dad was only 16, having survived the Depression where they lost all the money that was going to send him to out of town college, and instead he went to City College, and having survived the war, his mantra to us was, if nothing terrible happened to you today, you need to be very grateful. And he would constantly counsel my sister and I to learn to be satisfied. If it's good enough, it's good, it's terrific. You have to be grateful and thrilled that nobody you love died today. And once my dad turned 50, he would announce at every Passover Seder, he used to run these great Passover Seders, he would announce that he was satisfied. And what he'd say was, he was satisfied with his life. He's 50, and he would say, my bags are packed, I'm ready to go. He felt he had had a full life. He had a wonderful wife that he loved. He had children he loved. He had a career. He was very grateful that my mother, who had suffered from severe kidney disease, had outlived all the doctor's predictions about her early death. So she was still alive and reasonably healthy. And he was ready at 50 to die without complaint, especially because his own father had died at 40. And he was very grateful for every year that he lived beyond what his father had lived. And he did die 16 years later. He died at 66 suddenly on November 16th, 1980. And actually, he was in Skokie in Chicago visiting me when he died. So I was there in the hospital when the doctor told my mom that this was a coroner's case. He died suddenly. They didn't know why. They needed to do an autopsy. And my mom said, no, 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 I don't want an autopsy. It's against Jewish law. And in her mind, an autopsy was going to find out if he got poisoned or something, that it was something the police needed to look into. She didn't realize that an autopsy could have helped her family. And so the doctor said, oh, okay, you don't want it, I'll write down no. And what we didn't know was that my dad's death was a pattern and that maybe the autopsy could have saved and helped future generations. Okay. This is a picture of my sister when she's 54, my niece, her daughter, Karen, at 23, and they are joining me at my son, Michael's Princeton graduation in 1996. The rest of the family's missing because my daughter, Judy, was graduating from high school that very same day back in Chicago. So my husband's there with her in Chicago graduating. My sister's healthy here. But a couple of years later, I would talk to her on the phone every week. And a couple of years later, she was constantly coughing and out of breath and exhausted. And week after week, she was still sick. And she'd tell me she went to the doctor. The doctor said it was a virus. The doctor said it was a cold. The doctor said it was bronchitis. The doctor said it was pneumonia this time. And they said, no, well, you're teaching young children. They're always sick. You must have caught it from them. And somehow this just didn't sit right with me. It was going on for too long. So I called my nephew, Karen's brother, and told him they were living in Boston. And I told him, something weird is going on with your mom. She's sick all the time. And he said, well, we're going to come visit next weekend. They hopped on a plane, and his wife was a physician. She had just graduated from medical school. And she took one look at my sister, barely able to walk across the room without getting totally out of breath. And she said, Mom, I think you have heart failure. And heart failure sounds like your heart has failed, but it really means that your heart is failing. And she went to a cardiologist, and her daughter-in-law was right. She was diagnosed with something called dilated cardiomyopathy, which caused the heart failure. And the cardiologist took a full family history. They didn't see anything suspicious. And so he said that my sister's disease was caused by a virus. That sometimes, common viruses, as we've heard now with COVID, can lead to organ problems in your organ, and that this one attacked the heart. And we believed him. And thankfully, the medication that he gave her improved her health. She no longer had heart failure. She still had, a problem with her heart. It wasn't working fully, but she was able, instead of to play singles tennis, she was able to play doubles tennis. So her life was great. And this is her daughter, Karen, again, 10 years after the picture at the graduation. And like her mother, Karen, the two of them were always the life of the party, very vivacious. And here she is at my daughter Judy's wedding. And she jumped up in her bright green dress and decided that she would sing with the band. So here she is spontaneously singing with the band. In the intervening time, she had studied to be an actress, and she had acted in community productions. She spoke fluent French. She traveled the world. She was beloved by her third grade students, and she had had a short, unsuccessful marriage to another aspiring actor. And after they divorced, she came in contact again with a high school friend, Andrew, and they had a whirlwind storybook romance. And this is a picture of them a few months after their marriage. And they were ecstatic that Karen, even though she was 36 and they were worried about it, she got pregnant right away. And here she is showing off her bump. The next morning after this picture was taken, they went walking in downtown Brooklyn, Brooklyn Heights. They were going to go out to dinner that night for Andrew's 37th birthday. And they stopped in at a restaurant for a bite. And as they were leaving, Karen slumped in her chair, her eyes wide open, and they called for an ambulance. They couldn't restart her heart. She was dead, and the baby was dead. So they went from being on top of the world to this unimaginable tragedy. Now, Karen had problems before she died. She did get out of breath when climbing stairs, and she complained to her doctor about this. And her doctor said, you know, Karen, you're 6 months pregnant. All women who are 6 months pregnant get out of breath. So the day she died, November 16th, 2008, was 28 years to the day after my father's sudden death. This time they did an autopsy. It was an autopsy. Everybody wanted to know what happened here. And the shock of the autopsy was that she had dilated cardiomyopathy, the same disease that her mother was diagnosed with years earlier. And as soon as we got that diagnosis, everything changed. It was clear now that the dilated cardiomyopathy was not a complication of a virus. It was genetic. And my own daughter was 3 months pregnant, and I was terrified that she was at terrible risk. And so I set out to find the mutation. And I contacted Dr. Elizabeth McNally, who was a genetic cardiologist. Actually, I became her patient. She was the wife of a yeast geneticist I knew in town. And she tested my sister's blood for all the known mutations that could have caused this tragedy. And there weren't very many known at the time. It was the beginning of the genetic revolution. So she found nothing. A few years later, she tested again, found nothing. Years passed, she tested again, found nothing. So there are more and more genes, but still nothing that my sister had. Meanwhile, Dr. McNally realized that even though we didn't know the gene, we knew there was a genetic cause. And we knew that I was at risk, my children were at risk, and my nephew was at risk. And so what she said was that we should act as if we had the mutation. We should get an echocardiogram every year so that we could find out if there was a problem early and treat it early before it caused real problems. And so I wanted to tell my children, you have to get an echocardiogram every year because you might have a mutation that could kill you. And my husband said, what? You're going to scare the children? You're going to tell, hey, they won't want to have kids. Michael will be afraid to get married. No. You can't tell them this. It's a fluke. It'll never happen again. Forget about it. Well, I felt very strongly that I couldn't hide a serious medical problem from them like this. What if it caused their illness and death? So we had a compromise. We agreed that I could tell them everything that Dr. McNally told me that day, that week. I could tell them what they should do, but they were in their 20s and 30s. They were adults. I couldn't ask them later, did you get that echocardiogram? The next year, I couldn't say, did you remember you're supposed to get an echocardiogram again? No, I couldn't ask them that again. I could just tell them once. And I wasn't thrilled, but I agreed that that was a fair deal. And that's what we did. And finally, in 2014, 6 years after Karen's death, Dr. McNally said to me when I came in one day that it didn't cost $1 billion to sequence the genome anymore. And she had 5 patients like my sisters who she knew had a genetic problem, but she didn't know the mutation. So she said that she was going to sequence the genome, all the genes in all of these patients. And she did that for them and for my sister. And for my sister, she found a smoking gun, a new heart disease gene, in a gene called FLNC. It makes filament C a component of the heart muscle. And it can be, the disease it causes, cardiomyopathy, heart muscle weakness, and sudden cardiac death. These can be treated with beta blockers, implanted defibrillator, or in severe cases with a heart transplant. So one of the big questions for me was this mutation new to my sister? Sometimes that happens. You get a new mutation in a person. Or did she inherit it from our parents? If she had inherited it from one of our parents, then I could have that mutation and I could have given it to my children. My parents were gone. We didn't have their DNA, so we couldn't ask that question. One of the things I want to tell you about is that you can bank your DNA now. It's not very expensive. And so if your children want to find out a question like this, they would be able to. Okay. So once we knew the mutation, I started searching papers for other information on it. And surprisingly, I found this exact same mutation was reported in other patients. So I emailed the authors and they treated me like a colleague, even though I was a yeast geneticist. And what I found was that at least two of the families who had this mutation, they knew their ethnicity, and they were Ashkenazi Jews. So I looked this mutation up in a DNA disease database, and I found there that 1 in 800 Ashkenazi Jews had this mutation, but it wasn't found in any other populations. So it was a mutation from our medieval ancestors, from one of those 500 that I talked about from 500 years ago. So it wasn't new to me. It'd been around for 500 years. It spread across Europe, and then we brought it with us to America. And so now this isn't just my family story anymore. It's part of the Ashkenazi community story. This is Celia Hymanson, my mother's other grandmother. She was the great granddaughter of the Tzaddik of Lazde, Yoshe Moshe Avram Levinsky, and he was a revered rabbi in Lithuania. And this is a screenshot of his ethical will that was found in his briefcase in Warsaw in 1845. So whether Ashkenazi families descended from tailors, like my father's side of the family, or from Tzaddiks, like my mother's side of the family, all Ashkenazis descend from the same small founding population and are at risk for the same mutations. Okay, now that I hope I've captured your attention and your heart, let's look at the medical problem I'm here to discuss today. Actually, this month, a couple of weeks ago, well, last month, now we're in February, in January, a white paper, which is a comprehensive review, was published by the Genome Medical. And what they said was that all cardiomyopathy patients should get genetic testing because 50% of them have a genetic cause. And this is recommended by every major cardiology society today. But the implementation they report is terrible. Everybody should get tested, but only 1% get tested. And it's not just cardiology patients, but other heart disease patients. Long QT syndrome, everyone should get tested. Only less than 2% are being tested. Familial hypercholesteremia, everyone should be tested. Only 2% are being tested. Hereditary amyloidosis, 6% are tested instead of everyone. So why is this? What is the problem? And it seems to be a bunch of myths that I hope we can refute. But we're not up to the myths yet. I want to tell you that bad genes aren't the only cause of heart disease. We know that other things can cause it. Alcohol, drugs, diabetes, smoking, obesity, pregnancy, virus. But we used to think if we found an environmental cause, that was the reason, and we shouldn't look any further. But now we know there are lots of genes, hundreds of genes that can cause heart disease, and that they work together, and that if you have a gene that causes heart disease and then have an environmental factor, that's even more likely that you're going to show heart disease. And indeed, 1 in 5 people who have an environmental cause of heart disease also have a mutation that causes heart disease. So they should still all be tested genetically. So, what are these myths that are preventing us from getting the tests we need? Well, the first thing is that doctors and patients still think genetic testing costs thousands of dollars. They remember that $1 billion from the first sequence. But actually, nowadays, most patients pay less than $100. And often the out-of-pocket maximum for the patient is $250 or less. Doctors are terrified of genetics. They remember that horrible course they took as an undergraduate, and they are afraid that ordering and interpreting a genetic test is very complicated. But actually, tests can be ordered and interpreted like buying a dress from Macy's online. It's easy, and with the company-provided genetic counselors, the interpretation can be done very easily. It is believed that sudden cardiac arrest only occurs to those with a known heart issue. But actually, sudden cardiac arrest can be the first symptom of a heart problem. Well, sudden cardiac arrest only happens to old people, but actually, genetic heart conditions can affect people of all ages. And then lastly, learning about a genetic mutation is just going to cause worry. There's nothing we can do about it. But actually, learning about many mutations can lead to action that can save and improve lives. Now, I have to admit that some mutations we can't do anything about. They may just cause worry. But the American College of Medical Genetics and Genomics has looked into this very carefully, and there's some 7,000 genes that cause disease. We don't know what most of those are. Then there's a bunch of genes, a lot of genes, probably several, maybe 1,000, that we know what they cause, but we don't know what to do about it. So they have a committee that every year meets and argues and decides what genes we can do about it. This year, they've decided there are 84 what they call actionable genes, because if you know that you have a mutation in one of these genes, you can take a medicine, you can do something to improve your life and to prevent death or severe disease. Surprisingly, you would think that the American College of Medical Genetics and Genomics would suggest that everybody be screened for these 84 mutations, but they don't suggest that. They think it's too expensive. They think that the doctors don't know how to do it. I don't know. They have excuses. What they do suggest is that if you went in for a cancer screen and they by accident secondarily find you have a mutation in one of these 84 genes that causes heart disease, they should tell you. So they're saying that you should be told about it, but if you happen to find that you have one of these mutations, but you shouldn't go out and get it screened, or we shouldn't pay for that or insist that everybody do it. I disagree with that. I would like to see this changed, and they do have a committee debating about when and if they should change and recommend universal screening. Their concern is that people will find out they have this mutation, and not follow up with doctors. That doctors are not, there aren't enough doctors who know how to order these tests and what to tell people about it. And there is a concern that if you're testing people who aren't sick and you find a mutation, it's possible that in their family background, it might not cause disease. And so you have to be a little bit careful about that. If they're telling you that you should get an echocardiogram every year because they found a mutation, that's something I would say, yes, go do it. If they're telling you you need to get a mastectomy because of the mutation, you should check to see that in your ethnic group that this mutation is really pathogenic before going ahead with something so drastic. Okay, so let's look at the numbers for a minute just to see if I can convince you about universal screen testing. There's 1 in 2 people have a BRCA mutation and have no breast cancer family history. 1 in 5 people without family history have genetic disease. 1 in 6 will have an actionable change in care if they get genetic testing. There's more than 50 known hereditary cancer mutations, genes. 1 in 250 people have a hereditary heart problem. And compare that with screening that we do. In newborns, we screen for congenital hyperthyroidism and for galactosemia, where the frequencies are much lower. Okay, so we focus on actionable genes because we're attempting to avoid conversations like this. You should have chosen parents with better genes. We want to give you something better you can say. And it's not just, it's not just heart disease, but also cancer patients. We now know that 5 to 10% of all cancer survivors have a mutation that caused their cancer and could go ahead and cause more cancers in them and in their families. So we're recommending there's a lot of people who are cancer survivors, but that means there's a lot of people who have cancer mutations that could affect their families and them again. So I want to remind you that we all have 2 copies of every gene, and dominant genetic disease, like the type that affects my family and generally the kinds that cause cancer, only require 1 bad copy. So here's my dad. I've made him red because he is susceptible to disease because he has this mutation. And he gave each of his children 1 of these copies. 50% chance that he gave you a good copy, 50% chance a bad copy. My sister got the bad copy. I won the lottery. I got the good copy from him. My mother had 2 good copies, so we each got a good copy from her. Recessive mutations are when you need 2 bad copies of the gene to cause disease. And there, a lot of things like Tay-Sachs are recessive. These are very frequently screened for by physicians. Prospective parents usually go through a whole set of prenatal screening. So that we're doing a good job in. But the dominant disease mutations, like the ones in my family, are not frequently screened for, either in Jews or in any ethnic group. So one important benefit of knowing about a disease-causing dominant mutation is that you can warn relatives about it. So what you do is, if the mother here is known to have a genetic mutation that puts her at risk for disease, they tested the 2 children, only one of them had that mutation. Now we don't need to test the daughter's family anymore. They're safe. But the son's family, we test his children, and then we would test these children's children, but not this one's children. So that's cascade genetic testing. And I seem to be running low on time, so I'm going to speed this up and just summarize and say that it's very important to know that not everyone with a mutation gets the disease. They just have increased risk. And so this looks very frightening. The FLNC mutation, here's with your risk of cardiomyopathy without the mutation and 90% risk of disease with the mutation. But it isn't even that high, because that's 90% if you go to the doctor and get your heart checked. But the chance, many of these people have no idea they have heart disease and it never will bother them. 15% of the people with an FLNC mutation have sudden death. And some other people have cardiomyopathy. Similarly, with heart disease, having the mutation increases your risk, but it doesn't increase the risk to 100%. And finding that you have the mutation and getting testing, screening for cancer frequently so that you find the cancer early means that you have a 90% or in the 90% survival rate instead of a much lower survival rate if the disease is found later. So I want to stress the idea of penetrance. That's the chance that a mutation causes any effect with a family story. So after we found out that I did not have the mutation, I went to tell my children good news. You don't have to get tested anymore. No more echocardiograms are needed. Um, and when I told my daughter, she was relieved. When I told my son, he said, tested? Tested? Was I supposed to be being tested? Oh, yeah, you told me about that. But when I went to my doctor asked if my mom, if you had dilated cardiomyopathy and you didn't. So the doctor said, I didn't need to be tested. Unfortunately, the doctor didn't know about penetrance, that I could have had the mutation, given it to my son, and never been sick. So one of the things that bothers me is whether if my dad had had that autopsy, if it could have saved Karen. And now we know in modern Judaism, well, it's always been true in Judaism, that to save a life is more important than anything. And people are aware that autopsies can save lives. And so sometimes it's actually required that you go ahead and get an autopsy in order to be able to warn living relatives of dangers. The New York City Medical Examiner is actually doing post-mortem autopsies, testing the remains of people who died sudden death and warning their relatives of the fact that they could have this problem and should get screening to prevent sudden death. Let's go back to my family. My niece and my sister had the mutation. It was inherited from centuries earlier. Eventually, I came to realize that my father, who I was told had an enlarged heart because of his athletics, because he was a runner, came to realize that that was not from that. It was from his cardiomyopathy. His mother died suddenly when she was 59 in her sleep. They said it was a heart attack. And of course, his brother died suddenly of the dressmaker's mirror hitting him. So one of the things that when I started writing this book that I wanted to look into was how did these injuries kill this 4-year-old? And what I discovered, shockingly, was that he did not die of any injuries. If you look at his death certificate here, you can see that he died of failure, congestive heart. And here's a newspaper article at the time describing his heart trouble. So my grandparents made this mirror thing up. They didn't know about DNA, they didn't know about genetics, but they knew that trouble in families meant that other people didn't want to marry into your family. And that's why they left the town, moved somewhere else, and made this story up. And it worked. My father married my mother. They had actually a wonderful life, but unfortunately, the mutation didn't go away. So I hope you understand that my family story and the book is not about tragedy. It's about triumph. Here's a picture of my sister dancing, and she loved to dance her whole life as a child. And then again, 2 years after her daughter's death, here she is dancing with a failing heart after burying her daughter. This is resilience. This is choosing joy. It's very Jewish. We mourn deeply, but we also dance. Genetic testing shouldn't be about fear. You shouldn't be afraid. You're not afraid to get your blood pressure measured or cholesterol test. Getting a bad result there is a warning, something we can do about it. I hope that these tests are about the living and about protecting those we love so that they can keep dancing. So the take-home messages are genetic testing can lead to early treatment and protection for the patient and their families, but it's only useful if there's follow-up clinical care, which could be more intense screening, an implanted defibrillator, or medicine. Targeted testing is essential if a patient has a disease that is frequently caused by mutation, or there is a family history of disease. And family history is often not obvious because of penetrance and misdiagnosis. And here's the last page. I wrote this book to honor my family and to save lives. And it's 75% memoir, talking about Jewish life in Brooklyn and my journey as a woman in science. And it's 25% genetics. And I have a Jeopardy game that, if you want, you can play sometime if you like Jeopardy games, if your kids might like to play it. It's a story about resilience, about how families survive loss and protect each other, sometimes by keeping secrets and sometimes by revealing them. Okay, I went over. I'm sorry, but I
No
hope we have
problem.
questions.
And you still have a quiz prepared, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, so
Yes.
you're going to present this
Okay.
quiz. So
So
should I
thank you.
stop share or do I stop?
Yes, you can stop the sharing. Thank you so much for sharing. And I just want to tell everyone that I did read Susan's book, and it's really so heartwarming and so interesting and really captivating to read it. And uh, you do get to know her own journey and her family's journey, and also learn about genetics. And she prepared a quiz for us just to see if you paid attention, basically.
No, I want you to protect your families.
So it's a little quiz to help protect your families. So I'm gonna launch it. You can, Susan, you can narrate the questions.
Okay, what is an actionable gene? Is it a gene found only through research studies, a gene that causes disease only in childhood, a gene where medical care can reduce risk and improve outcomes, or a gene that guarantees disease? Now, do I wait for them to answer or do I go on?
Yeah, it's all shared at the same time, so please go
So
on.
just
There
answer
are more
that one and
questions.
then we'll
People
go on.
can.
Question two is, how has the cost of sequencing all of someone's genes changed over time? It's always cost about $500. It dropped from millions to about $10,000. It fell from about a billion to a few $100s. It's still too expensive for clinical use. Okay, the third question is, what is cascade genetic testing? Testing all genes in one person, testing only parents for a mutation, testing relatives of someone with a mutation step by step. Can't see questions, sorry. Testing children at birth. So what should we do? The questions disappeared?
Um, I don't
Maybe it's just
I'm
that
still
one
sharing
person.
them.
You
So
Okay.
have to scroll down.
yeah,
Yeah,
you have
I
to
am.
scroll down. There are five
Oh,
questions
everyone else
altogether,
has to scroll down. Okay, you said
and
too
everyone
soon.
can
Oh, well.
scroll down on their own
It's
screens.
five questions.
You submit at
Okay.
the end. You
The
submit at the
fourth
end.
question is, if someone is diagnosed with cardiomyopathy, what fraction should receive genetic testing? About 25%, about 50%, about 10%, nearly all, about 100%. And lastly, if someone has a disease-causing mutation, which statement is false? They will definitely get the disease if they live long enough. They should receive clinical care to catch disease early. Their first degree relatives should consider testing. They may never develop the disease. Okay, so go ahead and submit your answers. And I know that
Yeah,
some of
everyone can submit
but I hope
as
that even if you didn't submit, that still no questions. Sorry, but I hope that
I
Diane,
see that
you're
many
able to.
people are answering, so maybe if
Hopefully,
you don't.
Diane, you got to hear them and review, and hopefully you learned some of these things and will be less afraid of genetic testing. So,
So yeah, I see that the first question has already been answered by a lot of participants, and I'm gonna just wait a bit more uh, to make sure everyone who wants to answer can fill out the questions. And then right after this, we'll let Susan analyze a bit the answers, and then we'll get into Q&A in a moment. We are already collecting
oh boy, I
questions.
don't have the answers in front of me. I have to look them up.
I'm sure you will. I'm sure you will know them, but I think
Actually,
that
I'm going to start because I wanted to have them have time for their.
okay, so I'm gonna end the poll and
Okay,
share the results. Do you see the results, Susan?
no, but it doesn't matter. I'm hoping that everybody, you'll let me know because I'd like to know how they did. But an actionable gene is C, where medical care can reduce risk and improve outcomes. Can you tell me what the results were?
Yes. So on the first question, 93% of those who participated said a gene where medical care can reduce risk.
Great. Okay. And how has the cost changed? It fell from 1 billion to a few thousand. C. How did we do?
88%
All
indeed.
right.
Mark this
Cascade
one.
testing is testing relatives of someone with a mutation step by step. How'd we do?
94%.
All
So
right.
people
You
are
guys
doing
are such good
amazingly.
students. If someone is diagnosed with cardiomyopathy, what fraction should receive testing? Nearly all. D.
94% again.
And if
Chose
someone
this
has a
one.
disease-causing mutation, which statement is
Thank
false?
you for calling the
A.
Miami City Ballet. Our audience services team
Oh,
members are
sorry.
assisting
I
us.
think we need to mute. Okay.
They will definitely get the disease if they live long enough. It's not true. What is true is that they should receive clinical care to catch disease early. Their relatives should consider testing, and that they may never get sick.
Okay. 79% chose
Okay,
A.
pretty good. Thank you, guys. So hopefully that will help you and your
I
family.
think, did I just share it? Okay. Anyway, we finished with
Finished
the
with it. Let's
quiz.
get questions.
And then let's go into questions. So the first question was, how accurate are the genetic tests?
Well, the sequencing is perfectly accurate, but what they'll tell you is that you have a mutation that is pathogenic. It can cause disease in many people, or likely pathogenic, or they'll tell you that the mutation is found in lots of people. There's a lot of variation. It's benign. It's not going to cause any trouble, or it's likely benign. And then there's a bunch of cases where they tell you it's a variant of unknown significance. It means we don't know. So then you have to wait and see if your particular variant, if they get more information about it in the future. And of course, just because you have a pathogenic variant does not mean you will get disease. It means you have a higher chance and you should do screening to check for it.
Thank you. The next question/comment is from a physician who says that it is very difficult to order surveillance testing, such as echocardiograms or endoscopy, for example, if there is no ICD-10 code and insurance won't pay. So I don't know if you want to comment on that. There is also another person, Martha is also sharing that insurance doesn't really
Well,
pay for these
insurance
tests.
covered my echocardiograms, and I didn't even have a mutation. We didn't know about it. So echocardiograms, MRIs for screening seem to be covered. I don't know about the other things that were mentioned by the physician. Certainly, we want to work to change that, because there is no point in finding you have the mutation if you can't get the screening. Certainly for cancer, if you have the mutation, the mammograms, things like that are covered. So I guess it will depend.
Thank you. And I just want to share a comment which I find very touching, and thank you for sharing this.
Diane K, don't believe the virus story. Get a genetic test, and you can get it for free at everygene.com for free. It's through
Yeah,
Harvard.
we'll share this website tomorrow. So there's a comment I'd like to read. She says, it's critical to us. My dad died of heart disease when I was 7. 5 of his 6 siblings died of heart disease. The 7th died in a plane crash. I don't have any children, but I'll let my cousins and nieces know. 2 of my brothers died of heart disease. I always thought it was mostly lifestyle based. So
Again, you may be able to get it for free from everygene.com if anybody in the family was ever diagnosed with cardiomyopathy, because that is a cardiomyopathy study. Otherwise, get the test. You get a doctor, you keep going to a cardiologist. You can always contact my cardiologist, Elizabeth McNally in Northwestern, but you should be able to find someone else. You write to me, I can tell you there's someone in, and the screening is about, if insurance doesn't cover it, the screen is about $250, but it will cover it if you have a history like that.
thank you. And we'll share Susan's email address and website tomorrow, where you can also find the book, but also can be in touch with her. So if some of you recognize your own family history in this, I would definitely recommend to get in touch with Susan and find out more. Another comment, my family has a long history of cancer, and yet no doctor I've seen in my 70 years has ever had any interest in testing beyond the standard mammogram and colonoscopy.
You get a genetic test because then you can find out who in your family is at risk for cancer and who isn't. And they can get more frequent genetic screenings, and not genetic, clinical screenings. You
Yeah,
should
I
be
see.
able to find somebody who will give you a regular cancer screening test. The everygene.com will screen for the 84 actionable genes, which doesn't cover all of the genes that someone who has cancer in their family should get. But that you can get for $199, and we'll put that in the website.
Thank you. And I see more comments. I feel like many people are recognizing certain patterns in their own families. So I won't read all the comments, but I just want to say here that
I'd
yeah,
love to hear from
someone
you, though.
who
Email me.
thought it was caused by a virus, but then there's also someone sharing the genetic testing saved my life and
Good.
likely will have a positive effect on the longevity of my younger relatives. So that's
Well,
also
if you're 84, you're not worried. You're not getting a genetic test for you. You're getting a genetic test, if you get it, to find something that could help your children or other people. So the people who should really get the genetic test would be the ones who have had cancer in your family.
Thank you. How can privacy and security be best assured if going the genetic testing route?
So when you get a genetic test through a clinical place, it's just like going to your doctor. It's all private. If you get a genetic test through 23andMe or through Ancestry.com, that's not clinical genetic testing. They're only testing tiny, tiny little bits of your genome, not everything. It's like 1,000-fold less information, and it's not clinical. Although I think I'm not worried about it, but clinical testing through GeneDex, through everygene.com, through anything that your doctor is going to order, or that you get, is as protected as you're seeing your doctor and the doctor's talking with you and telling you have heart disease. That's protected. It's in your medical record.
Thank you.
But
Is there reluctance?
insurance, can get access to your medical record, right? So for some insurances, they're not allowed to discriminate against you in the United States for a genetic. They can discriminate against you because you have heart disease, but they can't discriminate against you because you have a mutation that could cause heart disease. But they can for life insurance. That has to be changed.
Thank
The
you.
actionable gene not
Is
identified.
is
You
the
can, you can,
sorry,
I'm
sorry.
sorry,
I don't know which. I'm going to read questions just to make sure that we can try to get all of them. Is the reluctance of doctors to recommend testing because of insurance?
they think it's going to cost you $1 billion or $50,000. They don't understand that even without insurance, it's not going to be more than $250. The doctors are not that well educated in this.
Mm, thank you. And the next question is about your book. Why did you choose this title?
Because actually my husband suggested it. He didn't do much for the book, but he suggested this title and everyone liked it because it was amazing to me that my uncle didn't die of a dressmaker's mirror. He died of cardiomyopathy and heart failure. So it sort of captured my attention, and it was a shock to me. I mean, for over 100 years, we thought the dressmaker's mirror, and it was bothering our family that this happened. How could my grandmother have gone on and continued to be a dressmaker when this killed her child? And in the end, it was something totally different. But I do have the subtitle to give people an idea of what it is: Sudden Death, Genetics, and a Jewish Family's Secret. Usually they don't let you keep a title. The editor changes it, but my title stuck.
Thank you. If an actionable gene is not identified, do you still share with all first-degree relatives? the fact that it's not identified, I guess.
There's nothing to share if you don't know what it is. So,
Okay.
if you can't share it with anybody. But um, yeah, I'm sorry, I don't understand the question. But
Okay.
every year we will get more actionable genes, and not, that society says there's 84. There's ClinGen that has 400 genes that they think are actionable. So if you get any kind of hereditary result from any kind of genetic screening, I would recommend sharing it with your families.
Thank you. Do the genetic testing sources that you suggest use a blood sample or saliva
They can
source?
do either. It doesn't matter. Sometimes if the saliva doesn't work that well, they'll switch to blood.
Um, okay. Yes. So, I recently participated in a research project where they tested for the genetic gene LPA. I was relieved to find out I do not have the bad gene, even though I have a lot of heart disease in my family. Is that included in the genetic testing you're recommending?
I'd have to look it up and see if it's in the list of genes. I just don't know. You can look at it, though, if you go to everygene.com and you look at the both tests. They have the heart disease test that's free, which I'm sure would have it because they have all the heart disease genes. And then they have the general screening, which is the 84 actionable genes, and they'll tell you the names of the genes.
Thank you. I think I went through all the questions. I hope maybe Susan, you've seen something that I skipped and you wanted to comment or answer on, then please feel free.
Well, what's the end? Sherman has, do you still tell the first degree relatives or their offspring that there is cardiomyopathy, even what? I couldn't see the rest of it.
Yes. Is this even if there is no actionable gene identified,
Oh,
or
yes,
you
I
just tell
would.
your own kids only?
Well, I would tell the family. Um, for heart disease, anything is actionable for heart disease because you can get a defibrillator, you can get a heart transplant. It's useful to know. Cyrus, yeah, my uncle Cyrus, yeah.
Yeah. So thank you everyone for the comments and the questions and for your interest. And I just as from the reader's point of view, I just want to tell everyone that it's the book, even though it talks about genetic disease
I'd
and
be happy to Zoom with a book group. I do that. I don't have a discussion guide, but I'm happy to join on Zoom with anybody. I also, uh, gave you that um, Jeopardy quiz that is fun that you can do with a group. Group. Um,
thank you. Yes, I was
somebody
just
said people aren't going to marry you. I haven't seen that. I see people marrying all sorts of people nowadays, and everybody has some kind of genetic problem. Uh, I don't believe in this hiding thing. I think it's more dangerous for anybody, and I don't believe that if somebody tells me their family is perfect, that it is. They don't know, or they're lying. You choose somebody because you love them, and you want to share your life with them. And you know, my mother had a wonderful life with my father. He died at 66, but if she knew, she would never have changed her mind. So, yeah. So
thank
my book is a love story to my family.
Yeah, so that's what I wanted to say, that even though it may sound scary for some people like to read about all this genetics, but there's so much heart in your book and so much about your family and your own story that I think uh like while you also learn about genetics, but you also it's a very interesting book of a family's life story. So I just wanted to share that with everyone, that I think it's just a genuinely a good read. So thank you so much, Susan, for sharing your expertise and sharing about your book and answering all these questions. And thank you everyone for joining us today. It was lovely to have you here. Tomorrow we'll send out, of course, as always, this recording and also Susan's website and how to get in touch with her and how to order the book if you'd like. So you'll receive all this tomorrow. And just very briefly, our next event is on Thursday, which will be about the Jews of Pakistan, which is largely the Bnei Israel community. If any of you know them, it's an Indian Jewish community but we'll focus on the Pakistan region. And on Sunday, we'll have a talk about shtetls, in which Evgenia, if those of you who know her, will explain about shtetls in general. It's the first part of a three-part series, and in this first part, we'll learn about what a shtetl used to be. So please do join us in the other events as well. And thank you once again, Susan, for being here and for sharing
Thank you.
your book with us.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you for
Thank
the invitation. I had a great time.
Thank you. It was wonderful, wonderful, really. And Dora, you made a pun. You said, "Oh, at first you might think that it's sort of whatever the book." You said, "But it's full of heart," and I laughed so much because it's all about the heart.
Well, it
But
is
you
full
did
of
it,
heart. It's full of
yes,
heart in every way.
in every way. It was hysterical, really unintentional. Oh, so interesting. Thank you very much, Susan. Really great.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.